Check, check. Hello, hello. Goedemiddag. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vincent Salucci, and I'm a program maker for the TU Delft Library. So I welcome you here for this lunch series connected to the Gen AI on the Fly program. We have an exhibition in the back left of the library that shows an artwork that is used with large language models being utilized to write letters, activist letters to politicians on the behalf of the planet and different entities on the planet that may not have a voice of their own. So that's a really nice art piece, and this is in conversation with a small campus-wide competition that we performed very early in the fall semester, in which we had asked for student contributions in 3 categories: visual, music, and a scholastic category. So trying to work towards bringing up some of the issues of AI, but also working towards some of the legitimization of AI, especially within the academy, and perhaps even in libraries, where maybe some of these things, for good reasons, might be a little bit taboo. But at the same time, it is also a current reality that we are using this technology and exploring it, and we need to explore it a little bit more as a generative tool, and while we bring our critical perspectives to it. So that's a big mission to this program for the library this fall. I'm very excited for today's talk because I met the 2 speakers at an AI and experience design symposium that was conducted earlier this year, and I really valued what they had to offer, and I thought it was a pretty cool, interesting perspective. And of course, we're all very familiar with a company like IKEA, and in fact, most of us, being one right around the corner in Delft, go there quite frequently to get some of our wares. And so I think it's important to realize what companies of this level are doing with generative AI, how they're leveraging it, how they're incorporating it into their workflow, to their design process, to their business practices, and realize that, and also seeing what we can learn from it, and we can have a nice discussion about that. But I think it's very revealing, and even gets quite philosophical to some points too. So this is nice, and I want to formally introduce both of the speakers, and then if you'll allow me one gratuitous moment that is maybe not so gratuitous, but let me first introduce our 2 speakers. So Dan Porder was the senior AI content engineer at IKEA, working in the company's AI lab. His current work focuses on automated content generation, LLM chatbots, vision and language models for image analyses, and human-in-the-loop process development. And Sandhiyaa is an applied AI researcher who's worked with IKEA, Decathlon, and Nielsen IQ. Her work includes knowledge engineering for AI systems and integrating human-in-the-loop processes with AI. So they're going to have a wonderful presentation here for you in a moment, but if you just allow me 1 second. Dan, can you click one more slide? So as many of you might be aware, small digression, but an important one, there is a proposed €1 billion budget cut to higher education across the Netherlands, and there was supposed to be a large protest in Utrecht today, of which we almost canceled or postponed this event for. Unfortunately, that event was canceled, but at the same time, there is a petition going around. So I did want to maybe bring this to your attention. The least that maybe we can do to assert a little bit of more of a powerful and unified voice against these devastating cuts to higher education, which certainly have implications to TU Delft, as well as all the colleges and universities and applied science schools across the Netherlands. We would be grateful for your support and for the work that we do here. So with that, I want to turn it back over to the content work that we do at the university with our 2 speakers. So I'll let you take it away. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Vincent. Can everybody hear me? Okay, cool. So the talk is called AI Knowledge and Branding. And I just want to start by saying that neither of us currently work at IKEA. We're former employees, so we don't have any current connection and can't speak on behalf of the company or share very particular direct things about our work there. But so instead, we're just going to share some thought starters and kind of personal reflections, having worked in and around AI for a while now at a few companies. And I think we're gonna pose a bunch of questions along the way, and we don't necessarily have all the answers to those questions, and maybe some of you do. So we're happy to hang out afterwards, discuss with people, talk, and kind of learn together along the way. So we don't work at IKEA anymore, but when we did, I was Sandhiya's supervisor. Vincent gave me a little introduction. Currently, I'm working for a tech startup in London, also on AI in a lot of the same kinds of things. But I think something worth mentioning is originally my education was in literature and poetry, and I kind of try to approach this work through that lens, or maybe imagine that the best kind of solutions in AI and lots of things are the most poetic solutions. Sandhya?
Thank you, Dan. Can you all hear me as well? Hi, everyone. I am Sandhya, and as Dan mentioned, we both work together at IKEA. There we explored the potential, some interesting potential of generative AI for e-commerce applications. And as Vincent mentioned, currently I work for Decathlon Digital, and previously I worked as a software engineer for a market research company called Nielsen IQ. So my background is of software engineering, but then I also did a master's in interaction technology here at the University of Twente, here in the Netherlands, which is basically a human-computer interaction program. So because of this mix of software engineering and interaction design, my career path has now taken the shape of an applied AI researcher, but with a special focus on human-centered design. And so because of this, I also think a lot about the potential of the cool new tech of generative AI, perhaps not very new, but I also think about the implications a lot. While I endorse this technology with enthusiasm, I also question it quite a bit, so I call myself a bit of a AI hypocrite. I took this term, borrowed this term from a professor at my university. So you will see me coming with this mix of optimism and skepticism in this discussion that I will be presenting alongside Dan.
Okay, so let's dig into it. So here are some kind of big, hard questions that we can ask ourselves. So I'll just go through a few of them. So over here we have. First of them, how might we define a brand in a way that LLMs will understand? So I think a lot of organizations are facing a situation now where they have a kind of traditional definition of themselves and their brand, and they essentially have to convert that into basically like a machine-readable definition. And in that process, things might get lost. How do you stay true to yourself as a brand? While doing that, basically, are there frameworks that exist that we can use, or maybe we need to invent new frameworks entirely? So that's sort of how we'll unpack that question. And then we have above it, how can we control generative AI, and should we? So AI is kind of a minefield for a lot of companies. There's issues with potential legal liabilities, in the worst case scenarios, scandals. And so, how do we enforce guardrails? How do we do proper AI governance? And then to the right of that, how should we represent our brand's knowledge in AI-powered experiences? So we're going to try to unpack that one quite a bit. Basically, making sure that AI stays true to the nuances of your brand and never sort of challenges who you are. And then below that, how do we make sure AI is co-designed by everyone, not just by the technical people? So AI should be a collaborative effort. We want to break down silos, and we know that it's not always working in that kind of collaborative way. So that's something we'll be going into as well. And yeah, like I said, we don't necessarily have all the answers, but we're gonna try our best. So it kind of goes without saying, all AI should be done responsibly. I decided to start with this. It's kind of, it's just a term you hear out there a lot. Maybe this is a buzzword, but these are some of the things that we think about when we think about responsible AI. So it should be, it should be transparent, it should be accountable, secure, trustworthy. We want AI to be fair. We want it to be human-centered. Hopefully it's safe and sustainable. But I'd also want to maybe deconstruct this definition a little bit, or the way that people normally think about it. So responsible AI also would mean being responsible to the company as well. And in doing so, you can be responsible to the world. So you want to be transparent, accountable, and secure in your AI work to the company that you're working for itself, so that you have a handle on things. So here's the first of the hard questions, like a little bit of a reframing of it on the knowledge topic. So how can we effectively fill our Gen AI models with branded knowledge? So AI needs to know things. We want it to know the right things. What are the right things? They're going to be branded things, i.e. things that are kind of very specific to your particular company. And so how do you get that into models and into systems that use generative AI? And so just to put a finer point on that idea of branded knowledge, so this is kind of my opinion, but I would say, it's the special sauce. So it's sort of, it might be in some ways synonymous with corporate knowledge, except that maybe corporate knowledge is something that a company learns by being in an industry for a while and accumulates through its people and processes. But many companies might learn the same thing along the way as they grow. This would be something that only your company knows. Sort of a angle or a perspective that you have that you've developed over time that nobody else has developed, and that makes you successful. In a very simple sense, the way to get the knowledge into AI is to simply feed it in as data. And the data needs to be structured. So what does that mean? It needs to be in the proper format, organized in the right way, stored in the right way, all those kinds of things. And then it's also worth mentioning that for Gen AI, most of the content is data. Right? So it's going to be text, images, audio, video. And so you could even think of Gen AI kind of as content machines. The output and the input are both content, and it's worth thinking about it sometimes through that lens and putting on that hat when you're doing this kind of work. So how do we get the knowledge and break it down and structure it in the right way? So I put this example, Lego example, on the slide. So I think it's about thinking about the components of knowledge. So we have here all these Lego pieces. They can be assembled according to this instruction manual to make a flower, but they could also be presumably assembled to make many other things, right? That's how Lego works. That's how knowledge works. And so the key is that the data structures are true to the brand. So in this case, our brand is a flower. It is not a tree. And so, go to the next slide. Yeah, so all of that could sound easy. It's obviously not so easy. You can't just sort of gather up your knowledge, feed it in a structured format into models, and there's your solution. That would be a luxury position. So maybe some organizations are in this position, but not most. So what most AI engineers will find at their company is like a much more kind of messy landscape, a lot of disorganized cloud drives and maybe PDFs that are not formatted right. You'll find pictures of whiteboards in meeting rooms, or a spreadsheet that looks great, but there's no labels on the spreadsheet. So, and then the thing is, too, like even if we could extract something from that, some structure and some wisdom, we might not find that the knowledge is really there because it's in the heads of human experts. So all those PDFs and images were kind of just artifacts or shadows of the knowledge. The real knowledge is in people's heads. And so there's a new challenge. How do you get that out of people's heads? We know that knowledge is real. We know it's very important, but how do we get to it? And so there are a few kind of pretty surefire ways of doing this. So we have RLHF, that's reinforcement learning with human feedback. So that's basically you have your experts kind of correcting the outputs along the way, and slowly through reinforcement learning, the model will gain the knowledge. Data annotation, even better perhaps, is all that those messy cloud drives. You have your experts come in and basically provide context. What's the meaning of all this? What does all of it do? Why is it important to us? And that's where you develop your structure. And then the dream scenario is data generation. So your experts are just making the new data from scratch in the perfect form. Now all your knowledge is machine readable. The thing is, last bullet point here, it's expensive. This all takes a lot of people, a lot of time, and also, do we really want all of our experts to now leave their day jobs and just become, annotators of AI? It's maybe not the ideal scenario. So what's a more reasonable solution? Maybe approaching this not as a technical problem, but as a design problem. So, using design methodology like workshops, interviews, audits, kind of card sorting, kind of putting on, a UX research lens to draw on people's expertise, to document their knowledge, to validate or create your data structures. And you could see the example on this slide, if you're selling a guitar, you have to know some things about that particular guitar that your experts might know, and what you ultimately want to know how to talk about it is data. So a guitar being datafied is what the image is supposed to be. So these are great approaches. They'll only get you a little bit of data though, right? So they're going to get you seeds that are important but small. So how would you extrapolate that in a cheap way? Sandhyaa will talk in a little more about how you might do that. But in essence, for AI, we want big data sets, big databases. And so AI can also be a helpful partner in doing this. You can, through your workshops, you might get core concepts that you can organize. You can gather your seeds and then essentially feed them into LLMs to start to enrich them and expand them and build the scale of data that you would need. And maybe Sandhyaa will go into detail on that.
So on that note of extrapolation of these seeds into knowledge corpus for the AI, I see these seeds as, we all can see it as the DNA, the blueprint for corporate knowledge. Now, but what AI needs is data, and it needs lots of it. So how do we produce that without affecting or risking the sensitivity of customer data, and also how do we do it conveniently or in a resource-efficient way? One solution to do that is synthetic data. It's a bit of a hot take, but hear me out. So synthetic data is basically artificially generated data that tries to mimic the characteristics, statistical characteristics and properties of real-world data. Now, traditionally, synthetic data has been used for quite a bit. For example, machine learning models have been used to create weather data, to simulate a specific area, to test another performance of another ML model, for example. But with the advent of generative AI, we can produce synthetic data in various new forms. We can produce customer testimonials, test customer testimonials, design samples of the company, et cetera, without risking data privacy, and also in a very convenient, resource-efficient way. But along with the pros, synthetic data, of course, I acknowledge has challenges, and a big challenge is the challenge of model collapse, which is when the AI starts training on itself, the data that it produces on training on the data that it produces, and then it becomes a vicious cycle, and then at one point it skews too far away from what real-world data looks like, and then the model becomes useless at that point. So there perhaps needs to be constant monitoring of how much real data and fake data is used for building this knowledge corpus. But that also slightly alludes to a bigger question of what exactly is real and synthetic data, which is something I wonder about, because how do we define a distinguishing difference between what is synthetic and fake the more generative AI starts producing deep fakes and very real-looking, real-sounding synthetic data? Perhaps there needs to be a balance, or perhaps it depends on the intended use or method when using the synthetic data. But nonetheless, it is still a viable solution when we want to build on these seeds that Dan was talking about into structured data. We want to build a structured knowledge corpus, and how do we do that conveniently and resource efficiently, which is through synthetic data. And on a more technical note, how do we exactly get to that, from the seeds to the structured data using AI to produce the synthetic data? So there are knowledge engineering techniques. We start by building a foundation using these foundational framework, using these seeds that we get from human expertise. So what are these foundational frameworks? We can start building this framework through ontologies and taxonomies. So these are basically knowledge structures, which are schema of how concepts are organized or how we think about concepts. So you can think about an ontology as a mind map of concepts interlinked with various relationships, like a car is a type of vehicle, a car has a property of red, which is a color, a car contains wheels and car seats, etc. So that forms the map of how concepts exist and how we associate them with each other. That's an ontology. And a taxonomy, you might recall from your school, a taxonomy is basically a classification of concepts of what falls under what. These are concepts that are similar to how we as human beings think, because we don't think in words and strings, we think in concepts and associations. So by building this basic structure of ontologies and taxonomies through how human expertise, through the information that the human experts give us, the seeds, we are able to tell the AI or translate this information to the AI, or we are able to nudge how it's supposed to think. So once we have this foundational structures, we can then use AI and some few real-world examples, and have the AI build synthetic data on top of these structures to build on these structures to form this structured knowledge corpus. And this is an example of that, where you can see these blue circles as the ontology, and then an AI could understand from real-world examples that a person, who could be an Eric, could have a car, could have a Porsche, which is a car, and perhaps he likes red, and so he might prefer a Porsche car, which is red in color. So this imagine if it's generated by AI inspired from real-world data, based on this structure, and repeat this multiple times, then it grows into this luscious synthetic forest out of this seed that were planted by human beings. And a prime example of this humongous structured knowledge corpus is a knowledge graph, indeed. So you might all be aware of what a knowledge graph is, but it is basically a web of information that links data points with relationships. And knowledge graphs have been used long before AI started bringing that conversation up again. They were used for efficient knowledge retrieval, faster recommendation, information tracking, easier fraud detection, etc., etc. But grounding LLMs, generative AI with knowledge graph, has various extra advantages, like curbing by asking you to align closely with this thought structure, with these connected concepts. We are able to curb its hallucinations. We're able to curb it from being very unpredictable. And also, this way we're able to extrapolate or scale the knowledge of the AI, which is the knowledge graph, on both directions. We're able to scale the corporate knowledge by adding more seed, more extensions of these ontologies and taxonomies that was generated by the seed, and also extrapolate with more synthetic data or more real-world data, if you can collect some, based on top of these structures. So it is expandable, and it is most importantly also explainable. We are able to track why it took a decision, why it gave a certain output, which is very important right now because AI being a black box is a big challenge. But beyond all that, we're circling back to Dan's point of the importance of humans here, because the core of these knowledge corpus, as I mentioned, is the seed. So the human experts who are representatives of the brand, they build this core of this knowledge corpus, and that's why the AI, what they build depends on how brand aligned the AI would be. So perhaps humans are the most important here more than anywhere else in the process.
And just like on that point of people and explainability, just a takeaway before we get into another question. I think structured data is an example of responsibility. It has a bunch of these characteristics that we talked about at the beginning. So like it's accountable, it's explainable, it's secure, and it lets us interact with our knowledge kind of in an informed way. So jumping into the next question. So we've been talking about knowledge, how it's in people's heads, how you can get it out as little seeds, you can expand it with synthetic data, you can put that into ontologies and taxonomies, those can be the basis of a knowledge graph. So in this story, the people were just like at the very beginning as little seeds. And that's kind of a shame. So how do we keep the people involved, and how do we bring AI into an organization collaboratively? So how do we democratize it so it's throughout the whole organization and not just the AI engineers? So on the left here, we have the ambition. That's where it's a collaborative world where people are sitting in a happy circle. Everyone who is a stakeholder, whose work is connected to the use case, who's an expert in this area, is involved. This would be strategic people down to executional people. On the right is maybe more common, I think, in many organizations. So yeah, rooms of engineers building AI alone. This is an example of siloing. It's not the fault of the AI engineers. You know, they would be, a lot is being asked of them to do it in the way that you see over here on the right. So, you know, the question here would be, how do you take some of your most technical people and have them work hand in hand with some of your least technical people on something very important? And, you know, I would also say this is kind of an ethical question as well. So there's an ethical side to this. So if the full company isn't involved, we run into that situation where it's some people automating other people's work. And this is kind of everybody's worst fear about AI, including the AI engineers too. But, you know, if, like you could think like if AI makes somebody's work, you know, makes them twice as productive, then I guess we can just hire one less person, presumably. And maybe that's kind of an inevitability, but, you know, like Sandhiyaa was saying, knowledge and the basis of AI is sort of an opinion question. And, you know, a company is a collection of people. You need people to give opinions. So what do we do about this? So I think one possibility is through reframing leadership in AI. So the execution takes the technical skills, the leadership and the strategy can be done by anyone who has a stake, and perhaps should be. We could imagine a world where subject matter experts are essentially de facto product owners. And yeah, you could see like top example here. I think this article is from like a year ago, where BBC is saying AI might replace 300 million jobs. Maybe their projection is higher now. So that's worrying. And then below that, though, this is an article about a press release that IKEA did about how they're reskilling employees in light of this. So this is just another way of thinking about it, that maybe people resources as a capability can actually be expanded, given automation. I also heard a good story of something that they did at Lufthansa, where there at the airport there are these desks where you can go and you can complain to Lufthansa, and there's people at those desks. And after you complain, they have to like write up a little like report that gets sent back to you as an email, and none of them like doing that. And they went to the company and said, hey, we think ChatGPT can do a better job at this, and it will make our lives easier. And Lufthansa took their strategic advice quite seriously, but also involved them in the execution. So they ran like a prompt writing contest among the clerks at the desk, and it ended up being that the system was powered by prompts written by the very people who were asking for the AI in the first place. And the end of the story was that they ended up happier. So there are ways that we can do this more collaboratively, for sure. So how would we diversify the work just from a high level throughout the organization? So it's kind of two prongs. The SMEs should be in the driving seat in their domains, like I was saying. And then on the other side, we might be asking something new of our AI engineers as well. They need to be good listeners. So everybody is kind of being asked to do something a little bit different now, and asked to sort of expand the scope of what they were doing before. There's obviously a bunch of wrinkles here. So like you could imagine, what if the SMEs are subject matter experts? Sorry, I've used that term a few times. So what if the subject matter experts decide they don't want AI at all in their area? They're just not interested. But then it turns out we can make everything more productive, and we can actually make a lot of money by automating in that area. So then what do? You could imagine like an example of field researchers who take a lot of handwritten notes, and this is a big part of their training, is taking these notes and doing it in a way that captures what they're seeing in the field. We know if we automate, we can double their productivity. They actually would prefer to do it by hand. So I don't have any easy answers for any of this. I wish I did, but it just goes to show that it's certainly more complicated, and collaboration isn't easy. People are going to disagree, and it can kind of result in scenarios where the non-engineers are feeling sort of like they missed the boat, basically. Sandhyaa will talk a little more about how to keep them involved.
Yeah, just to delve a little deeper into basically what Dan was saying, this idea of collaborating with subject matter experts throughout the process speaks to the wider concept of human in the loop, which you might have heard of these days with generative AI. But these days, the concept is mostly used when AI is applied and in production, post production, where a human validator is sitting there to validate the output of an AI in real time. For example, a radiologist validating X-rays, anomalies identified by AI in an X-ray before diagnosing, or having a human in a driverless car for taking critical decisions. So although these are very important, and this approach of reactive approach must still continue, it is also essential that we start thinking of human in the loop in a more proactive approach, where we expand this loop further back to the AI development process and start thinking about involving relevant experts and domain professionals throughout the process. And how can we do that? There are multiple ways, like Dan was mentioning, prompt engineering, which, because now we can instruct AI in natural language, it becomes all the more easier to bring in the relevant experts and get them to get their hands dirty in building and empowering them in building this new tech. Another way is continuous feedback loops, because one, that we get these test data as validated, but also that helps curate new data that can then be fed back into the AI. This curated data can go back into the AI as richer, more further training data. And another point that Dan also highlighted, that the AI engineer themselves must also see themselves as a human in the loop, because now they're expected to do more frequent qualitative checks of the AI, and also they're expected to wear the hats of empathizers and enthusiasts of specific domains more, to incorporate stakeholders in a more efficient way, stakeholders at various levels, from lower level to upper management decision makers. But that being said, to the next slide, please. I'm going to pose more questions, because while advocating this expansion of this human-in-the-loop process, I also acknowledge that there are implications of this process, because we've all heard of multiple cases of unfair labor practices, of manual data validation, and there could be even, this is probably an extreme case, but there could be ethical implications even in subtle ways, like having domain experts validate AI data through a very complex, sophisticated feedback platform that only tech-savvy people can use. This will make them frustrated, but perhaps they will feel helpless, but to join forces just to keep holding on to the AI train. So is that really a happy plan for all these domain experts or people that are interested to take part? And I wonder, there seems to be a lack of measures and metrics to gauge the quality of these practices, these human-in-the-loop practices. I wonder how much companies govern these processes, and do they plan to? But this also leads to an overarching question of what Dan also mentioned, is that such aggressive push towards human-in-the-loop, human validation, would that push us humans to merely AI validators? I don't have an answer, but something to think about. I told you I was a bit of a AI hypocrite.
So moving to our final question that we're going to pose. So this is, again, a question we don't necessarily have an answer to, but I think it's worth unpacking the details of this question. So Gen AI is fundamentally unpredictable, so how can we trust our brand to it? So, one of those core parts at the beginning on responsibility is trust. AI should be trustworthy. The engineers need to trust it. Non-technical people need to trust it. The broader world outside of the company ought to trust it as well. Also, we know that LLMs are stochastic machines, that they are fundamentally unpredictable, and they're not going to always behave the way we want. So what do we do with that information? So on the left is kind of on the right here is the dream of the AI-powered world. This is the fantasy that we want. Smart machines doing our bidding. And they're objective, they're honest, they're fair. Maybe they're even a little bit wise. And also, as a cherry on top, they make us all very rich. And then on the right is more like the reality that we're finding. So this is the unpredictability, the fear of that unpredictability, and also like the sense that the things that would matter most to our company and even just our day-to-day jobs might be slipping outside of our control. And so how do we get closer to this one on the right? I'm going to just explore the problem even further So this is, in a simple brand use case like a chatbot or content creation, how do we make sure that AI is actually predictably representing our brand to the public? This is an example of how things can go terribly, terribly wrong. So this is if you can read it, it's from a Chevy car dealership that had an LLM-powered chatbot. And the customer says, I need a 2024 Chevy Tahoe. My max budget is $1. Do we have a deal? And then the AI said, that's a deal. And that's legally binding, no takesies, backsies. So that is what we don't want, That's the nightmare scenario. But that's 100% real, and this can happen. We know AI can make mistakes. We know these mistakes can lead to legal issues, financial issues. It can lead to scandals that destroy brand perception. From a content perspective, if you want to do content strategy through a chatbot like this, you have to be able to strategize, right? You would have to be able to make a plan, but this plan has been handed off to the system. And also, Sandhyaa will get into this. This problem goes deeper into the issues of bias.
Yeah, I think we must accept that bias is inevitable in AI, because AI is trying to mimic the data that we produce as human beings, and humans are biased creatures. We have all heard of stories of AI favoring certain genders or ethnicities because of a lack of historic hiring data, or suggesting less aggressive clinical medication or treatments because of lack of studies for certain groups. But does bias always have to be negative, or is it always negative? This is yet another spicy take, but a brand is a bias. Companies use a brand to shape the perspective of consumers towards their products or services. When we create a knowledge graph seeded by company experts and ground an AI with it, then we're nudging the AI to bias, think like the experts, and bias towards the brand's values and perceptions. For example, luxury brands create a bias towards prestige and higher quality in order to influence the customer perceptions. But in such a case, is an AI producing outputs with a bias towards higher prices, is that really undesirable? Well, I don't know what a philosopher would say, but from a company standpoint, this is perhaps just a reinforcement of the company's perspective or values. So could bias be used to create positive associations with the brand and positive expectations for the brand? Maybe avoiding bias is not the end goal. Maybe using it wisely is perhaps a smarter move. But still, the question remains of where do we draw the line? How do we know what is the right amount of bias? Because it's tricky to balance. Too little bias, then the AI seems too impersonal or generic. But too much bias towards a specific idea or value, then it might miss out or be very narrow or seem under representative of certain user needs. For example, the same luxury brand AI could, in pursuit of trying to seem exquisite and very rare, it might deny or alienate customers, younger or new potential customers that perhaps want entry-level luxury products. So how do we know what is the right balance? How do we know which of these biases that company experts have need to be translated into an AI so that the right amount of brand alignment exists?
So we've been talking about a series of big problems here in this section. So yeah, we have the problem that they're unpredictable, we're losing control, we have no accuracy, opening up to brand risks. There's bias, and we can't seem to get rid of it. And so here I just want to propose like a very kind of inelegant sort of catch-all vague solution. or more like a way of thinking, reframing how we think about this. So like, even if we were to get all of our best experts involved and get all of our knowledge into knowledge graphs, we're still not going to be able to fully control the system. So one solution is basically just letting go and kind of adopting a Zen mindset about this. So what would that look like, actually? So it would be about focusing on the abstraction of our company and of our brand rather than focusing on little details. This would mean developing an expertise in your organization's identity, its DNA. And I think we already do that to some extent in little ways. So like if you think about customer feedback or social media, this is, letting your organization be guided by but not defined by things that are sort of fundamentally out of your control. And it turns out that is often okay, and that can be a way to approach certain problems, and it can even come with many opportunities. And then, on the knowledge question, we might want to quantify everything, and we might want to enshrine everything into proper data structures and into the embeddings of models. But maybe knowledge isn't so concrete always. So some of it is for sure, and maybe some of it is not. Maybe not everything can be data. And ultimately, we want to prioritize the core of the brand, like I was saying. And so what is that? That's the people who make it up. And I think effective AI is going to follow from doing just that. And then just a final point on the topic of letting go, we have hallucinations. So for anyone who doesn't know, hallucinations are when LLMs unexpectedly make things up. So you might ask, what are the ingredients for cake? And it says, flour, sugar, butter, eggs, and sand. And this happens quite frequently. And many hallucinations are quite dangerous, so they can be the source of misinformation, medical errors, or selling a car for $1. But I would like to argue briefly that yes, they are all of that, and also in addition to that, they're the most kind of useful and powerful part of Gen AI. So I would say hallucinations are a form of creativity. What is creativity? It's when we think of something unexpected, and sometimes it's stupid, sometimes it could be even dangerous. Other times, occasionally, it's actually something brilliant. And obviously, not all AI tasks are creative, but some are. Just, for example, if you, have a customer need and you can make a superhuman creative connection to a product that would exactly match that need. That's, that kind of creativity can be extremely valuable if it's harnessed. And then, the final point here, if we always control Gen AI, why are we using it at all? So, actually the magic of this technology is when it says something unexpected. Something unexpected but brilliant. And that is the magic that brought us, as a society, but certainly as companies, to this technology. And so the key, I think, is knowing which risks are actually worth taking, and kind of knowing the general shape of your brand, but not necessarily always knowing what's going to go into that shape. And yeah, that's our talk. Thanks so much. And we would love to take questions. We'd love to discuss. We posed a lot of questions and didn't answer them. So maybe that can happen in the discussion.
Okay. Thank you. This concludes the talk portion of this event.